Okay, so we're going to start chapter 3, which is all about stress. First couple learning objectives, you want to obviously be able to define it and then list types that can impact your human relations. So we want to identify your personal stressors and identify how they're impacting your relationships with yourself and your coworkers, your family members. We also want to be able to explain the physiological changes that our body goes through when we experience stress. So, what happens to our bodies when we're actively experiencing the stressor, and what happens as a result over time. We're also going to identify the results when we have too much stress in our lives. So, what is stress in the first place? So, stress is any kind of response to a demand for change. So, stress today is defined as the way the body responds to a demand. It could be a physical demand, an emotional demand, and an intellectual demand. There are various types. It could be something acute, which doesn't last long, a daily stressor that doesn't happen constantly, right? Something small. For example, you wake up late, you wake up late, your alarm doesn't go off, and you miss breakfast and you rush to class, right? That would be an acute type of stress. Episodic acute stress would be that happening over time pretty frequently, right? Episodes of stress that doesn't last the entire day, it's particular to a situation. Chronic stress is stress that happens pretty consistently over time, okay? Chronic stress could be a loved one being ill and you are taking care of them. It could be your own illness, right? It could be a child. It could be a chronic, difficult relationship. And then we have eustress. Eustress is a type of positive situational stress in your life that builds challenge in your life so you can respond better to other situations. So eustress is not a bad thing. Try to think of an example of eustress in your own life. Maybe college, maybe the idea of coming to college for the first semester or the second semester, your body and your mind are challenging yourself to create time management, self-management, relationship management, right? So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can inflict stress on your life in the immediate future. Okay, so your text talks about workplace and personal stress. Of course, long hours or increased demands, being treated unfairly at work, not having acknowledgement in your own work, maybe never being promoted, never moving forward in your position, even though you're putting in the work, not having any control over your own work. Maybe you're constantly being micromanaged. Does this sound familiar? Maybe having a lack of job security. Maybe you're constantly worried that you're going to lose your job. Maybe your company is losing funds or clients and they're talking about going under or possibly laying people off. That's an incredible source of stress. And then they talk about personal stress, everyday challenges, making it to work every day, especially with children or with family members that you're taking care of, right? That's an everyday source of stress that can often be more difficult than the entirety of your workday. And then, of course, personality. We talked a little bit about A or B personality types. Of course, this is kind of a broad generalization. Not everyone fits into this type A or type B mold. We're referring to type A's value routine. They like to be on time. They often get very, very stressed when their routine is thrown off or they're late, and they become very easily aroused or stressed out by a break in this routine, right? They're high achievers, and if stress is occurring because they're not doing well in their job or their personal life, that's a very big deal to them. Type Bs are pretty much the opposite, right? Type Bs are much more flexible. They often brush things off. Oh, next time. We'll figure it out next time. We always have time to do it tomorrow. Or, they're very laid back. Not everyone fits into one of these molds. Sometimes a lot of people fit in between, which is great, right? That's pretty balanced. So think about, could any of your stress be related to your personality? Okay, so one of the main topics of this text conversation is, how do we deal with the symptoms of stress? First of all, we need to identify them. So your text talks about fight or flight. Your text doesn't really talk about your nervous system and its role in this, but I thought it was really important to just touch on. We're not going to go through a huge biological section on this, but I thought it was important for you to just understand the physical nature of how your body responds to stress. So what is fight or flight? So we have two major communication systems in our body, okay? And that's the nervous system, okay? You have your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. And they work in conjunction in order to pass messages through your body and coordinate messages between your brain and your other organs, right? So your central nervous system is comprised of your brain and your spinal cord. And then the rest is your peripheral nervous system, which is your organs, your glands, your muscles, and any kind of sensory neurons, right? So let's go back here. The autonomic division communicates with your internal organs, for example, your heart, your digestive system, and your glands, and it carries signals that regulate these organs. So your autonomic division regulates, for example, your heart rate, your stomach, okay, all of your digestive properties, right? So the sympathetic division of your autonomic division, okay, might help to look at this page here, is responsible for your arousal, okay? So that when that fight or flight, we refer to fight or flight, occurs in your body, it's the sympathetic division that's responsible for that, and that's part of your peripheral nervous system, right? So what happens is you encounter a stressful stimulus. Let's say a car accident, okay? Your body is going to immediately fall into arousal, where your heartbeat increases. You might start sweating. Your digestion is put on hold, okay? And your mind is often, well, at least on an intellectual level, also kind of put on hold. Your only priority is your safety. So your sympathetic division is basically putting you in a state of survival, right? So if you think about this, what happens in this fight or flight mode is we're not able to really think clearly about our relationships, our current situation in relation to our lives, or we don't really have a whole lot of intellect going. We are functioning at a very basic level, which is survival. So what do you think happens to us when we're in this constant state of fight or flight? Okay, so we're constantly experiencing this rush in epinephrine, which some people refer to as adrenaline. That's entering the bloodstream. Here's another image of what happens. So can you imagine if we're constantly in this physical and intellectual state of fight or flight? We're constantly having this accelerated heart rate, we're sweating, we're going to have issues with our digestion. What do you think happens? Well, to begin with, our body is in a state of producing far too much epinephrine and falls into this permanent survival mode. That's going to change our brain, right? So in my more biological psychology class, we talk all about how our brain is plastic, essentially. which means that our brain can physically be altered by learning, by situational experience, right? So if you are constantly in a state of arousal, your brain is restructured by the chemical messengers that transfer in this survival experience, right? And that's a bad thing. We don't constantly want our bodies to be producing epinephrine. It can result in little symptoms. If this happens occasionally, you might experience lots of headaches, migraines, stomach aches, poor digestion, issues like ulcerative colitis, or just constantly having that sick feeling in your stomach, muscle tension, aches and pains that you can't quite explain, right? We also call that psychosomatic uh, muscle issues, right? But it can also result in chronic disease, chronic heart disease, chronic bowel disease, issues with other organs, cancers, right? It can result in intellectual issues, disordered thinking, psychosis, anxiety, severe social withdrawal. And this can happen to perfectly healthy individuals that are put under a constant state of stress or hyperarousal. So it can affect anyone, right? So those are a big deal. So how does this all connect to human relations? How do we, draw relations between, stress and how we function in our lives? Well, essentially, when we're in this constant state of hyperarousal and stress, we shut down our emotions. We can't make rational decisions because we're not even thinking clearly, and we can't become emotionally available or really intellectually available to anyone else. This affects our job, this affects our self-management and our relationship management. So that affects every area of your life. Okay, so if we don't find ways to cope and deal with stress that work for us, that are personalized to us, we're going to experience some serious issues. People get fired for these reasons. Okay, people lose relationships. People experience divorce or separation from loved ones, or they might be, it sounds extreme, but people could lose custody of their children over this constant stress, right? So it's a huge deal in our lives. We've got to find ways to cope that are effective. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to pinpoint the cause of stress. You can't just immediately try and use methods that aren't personal to you when you don't even know the source of your stress, right? So you need to begin with self-analysis. What am I actively experiencing that is putting me in this state of arousal? Is it chronic? Is it acute? Is it situational? You really have to take the time to think, which is all about self-management, right? If you remember that from the last chapter. Self-management is really important. And that's all about, being introspective and noticing when you're experiencing something and reacting, right? So you can think about your habits. Is there something that you do daily that contributes to stress? Is there a daily situation that, is causing stress in your life? Are your emotions stressful? Are your interactions stressful? What are you currently doing to cope? Are they functional? Are they maybe bad for your body or your mind? Are they destructive coping habits? And your text talks about 4 A's for dealing with stress, right? Avoid the stressor, obviously, if you can identify the stressor, if it's a person or a situation. Find out what it is. You could try and put the stressor in a positive light. This is a great way to put your relationship in a better light if you're realizing that you're constantly under stress with your partner. Can you look at their redeeming qualities? Can you lessen the source of stress between you? They talk about altering the stressor. Are you someone who constantly says yes and accepts responsibility after responsibility in order to please others, right? Can you adapt to the stressor? Can you change your opinion and approach it in a different way? Maybe it's something inevitable in your life that you just have to do and you need to adapt or you need to accept it. Do you find yourself resistant to change that you have to experience? Um, and then they talk about accepting the stressor. Find other outlets to handle the stressor. Could you be exercising or meditating or incorporating more positive self talk or positive thinking? Remember, we talked a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy. So, cognitive behavioral therapy does not just apply to really severe issues, right? It could be chronic stress, it could be situational stress where you need to target the thought, which is affecting your behavior, and alter that thought, okay? Sometimes music is enough. If you're experiencing a daily stressor, could you incorporate, you know, music to change your mood? Or maybe you have a long commute and it's really stressful. Could you find something that might at least better your current situation? And then, of course, time management. If you're constantly stressing because you're late, you're missing deadlines, you feel underprepared, and that's stressful. Maybe you need to take a look at how you're managing your time. Okay, so what I want you to do is answer these few questions. They are on the discussion board. You need to think of a time when you felt stress. How did you react physiologically? How did you handle the situation, or how did it end? How could you react better in the future? Could better time management or self-management prevent this situation from reoccurring? And then I want you to respond thoughtfully to at least one peer on the discussion board. Okay, if you have any questions, please go ahead and post them in the discussion board under Chapter 3 questions. Thanks.